use the ChatGPT, right? You can use the ChatGPT, but don't copy paste directly from chat. That is the first message. Okay. That is regarding the report. Then, when it comes to your group members, right? How many students are there in your class? 100. 65. Okay. 60. Okay. Others will have 28. I cannot get what I can then. And I cannot get I can't. That is the next. That's also prepared. Then I will give the deadline. Right? In that exact deadline, you have to upload the PPT and the report. By 1 minute, you can upload it as a zip file. Upload. So you are not receiving marks for the compliance. 3 marks will be done for the compliance. Presentation doctor pen drive करेंगे So आपने कोई adjustment करते हैं pen drive instead of that upload a presentation can be part the presentation is pen drive. You can, but 3 marks will be done. Right? I'm very strict on the side because I'm giving you 30 marks. All the members should be participated. If someone is not participated without informing me, no. Either partially or not there. Very strict. So that is how you have to face the group society. Right? Any question? Regarding group. No. So Nisha know me, right? Coming from the Galle. Yes. No issues. All right. Then I'm coming to the group assignment. Right. So in your group assignment, what you have to do is firstly you have to select a company. Public limited company, PLC. Right. So when you are selecting a PLC, right, better to select a diversified company. Like non-field holding, diversified means they are operating in a different sector. Right? Like non-field holding, they are operating in the finance sector, hotel sector, right? They are in different sort of sector. They are university sector. Healthcare. Diversified company. So we can say that group of company. Better to select such kind of a company. And also make sure that I think you are having there's 100 members. That means 100 members divided by 5, 20 groups. Nearly 20 groups. Right? So each group should select a different company. Like let's say the group number 1 and 2 select same company. Both the groups will not be receiving any money. Because there are 286 PLC companies are there. You have to select 20 different companies. That you can arrange in a internally, like group list එක දාලා arrange කරගන්න පුළුවන් companies ටික. එකම company කවුරු select කරන්න එපා දෙන්නේ. දෙන්නේ එකම company select කරොත් even though your presentation is very perfect, two groups will not receive one. Both of them will not receive. So what you have to do is you need to pick the annual report, right? Don't laugh. This is how very strict, right? On the side. Take your own side. I will sort of paper. Other way, right? Srilanka, assignment annual report pick. You have to pick annual report. Then you need to analyze the ERM, Enterprise Risk Management Framework of the annual report. So don't worry about that word, right? We will discuss. Right? So that's what mainly you have to do. So at the initial stage, what you have to do is you have to select a company, a good company to analyze. Right? Clear? Yes, any issues? I like biology. Fine. Yes, any issues? Right. All right. Nothing. Nothing to ask. All right. So, just you, just elaborate myself, just know you. So, I'm coming from the University of Galle. So, I have lectured in this subject for almost now 4 years of time. Right. I'm going to start to develop in the right? This time I asked Malin sir to come and the corporate guns also. Previously I had done the corporate guns also. But this time the time being I asked him to come and take it. He's good, right? On all the aspects. So I think that's about corporate. And when it's your paper, at the initial at the first I'm saying this because I'm not mentioning this thing after that. Right? In when it comes to your paper consists of 6 questions. 6 questions. So you have to write 5 questions. That means you are having an option. With no one question. So one question you are receiving 20 marks. Right? And all questions are case-based questions. So now you are in the level that you have to analyze and write in a CFO or CEO perspective. Right? So therefore, the cases are given. Right? So in every questions, there are 3 parts. A, B, C, 3 parts. Right? Starting from the very simple thing to another hard thing. 3 questions. Every single question. Right? So you have to write 5. So you are receiving 3 questions from the corporate governance, 1 question from the ethics, and 2 questions from the. That is how the composition of the paper. Right? Right? Clear? 3 questions from the corporate governance, 2 from the risk management, and 1 from the. Right? Right. So when it comes to this subject, what is the importance of this subject? Corporate governance, ethics and the risk management. Why we need to learn? Even though this subject is very boring, I know this is not a good time to discuss the corporate governance and the risk management. ඒ වෙලාවට ඔයගේ දේවල් කතා කරන හොඳ වෙලා මේ වෙලාව නිදා ගන්න. ආවද නිදා ගන්න නේද? ලා තීර කතා කරලා අපිට නිදා ගන්න. දැන් වහින්නත් වෙනවා. අද ක්ලයිමේට් එක හොඳයි. අපතත් හොඳට ගෑවුවා නිදා ගන්න කොහොමද? The subject is boring. I know. It's a very boring subject. Yes. So many theories are there. When it comes to corporate governance, so many theories. So why this subject is very important? Corporate governance, risk management, and ethics. So when it comes to the businesses, right? So normally in the financial reporting, what we are doing is we are reporting the profit and the finance. But nowadays, people are looking at the finance. Even though you have become a chartered accountant, you still will not get a job. Sometimes you are only getting a 50,000 worth of job. 50,000 salary. Why? Because nowadays the organizations are looking at what? Chartered accountant who can create the value to the company. Value creation. Value creation. And also, as a potential investors, let's say I'm going to invest in a company. One company can invest करने. इस तरह ना भी company के invest करने क्या होगा? Company का profitable नहीं होगा. Company का profitable ना कभी invest कर. But when it comes to the modern day, like what we are looking at, profit or something else. Yes. So let's say you are going to invest in a company, but what you guys are looking at the profit or any other. Obviously, we need to look at profit, but more than that, now the non-financial things. So other than the financials, people are looking at the risk management. Because when it comes to profit, profit is what? The historical outcome. What does it? Historical outcome. What is we can see in the P&L? That is history, already past. As a stakeholder, as a shareholder, as a potential shareholder means I'm a future shareholder. So I'm looking at the historical value and invest. That investment will be first. And invest in a company. Company is a management is going to be financial accounting is going to be financial management is going to be profit take a company invest or totally go. Right? Profit take historical there. Already past. That financial statement of as a potential investor, what my expectation? I'm looking at what? Futuristic profit. Today I'm investing to get a profit in future. So if I decide the investment based on the historical amounts, right? What will happen? The investment is kind of acceptable one. So therefore, now people are moving towards to the non-financial indicators. Non-financial indicators. More than the financial indicators. So that's why the sustainability reporting is coming up, right? That's why the governance, the risk management, and ethics are playing a major role, right? Now, our company invest करने company invest करने. Now, I know මේ company එකට අනාගතයේදී මෙන්න මේ වගේ computer කෙනෙක් එන්නේ. මේ computer ආවොත් A business continue to run. Even though they are making huge profit, the company huge profit done is anivaryan compete in a title. So make our table business bankrupt. That's a risk. Then you are going to see the animal. They are showing the profit. But they have not identified the future risk in that under this way. They will identify the land. They will not risk. Compete again risk. So the investor invest even though this company is highly performing, well established, I'm not going to invest. Right? They have not identified the risk, the futuristic risk. That's why I told you more than the financial things. Now people are looking at the non-financial. One is risk management. Next one is the governance or the corporate governance. But that is very important. Even though you are performing well, right? Your company's corporate governance structure is not very good. Corporate governance are in. Then the one operation. Asia would do right? We are enjoying. For the operation. Why? So when you are looking at this country, right? So we are asking people to invest, but people are not investing. Why? The main issue is the corporate governance structure. As Ranjan Ramnaik correctly mentioned, but sorry, there, people are not going to invest. Corporate governance is not good, people are not investing. Because they want to create the value for the investment. Otherwise, the value addition. So the aspect that corporate shops. Company corporate governance this is then next one is ethics. Right? You need to maintain ethics as a professional. Right? If you don't have the ethics within your business, people are not coming to you. So that is why these three things are revealed in the algorithm. If you review the annual report for this assignment, you can see they have mentioned about the corporate governance, what their corporate governance structure is, what are the managerial personnel, how they are looking at the corporate governance sort of things, and how they are approaching the ethics, how they are maintaining the ethics. Those things will be there, and also the risk management process. So we call it as enterprise risk management. How they are managing the company's risk. What are the risks? So these are the responses, right? These are the procedures we are following to mitigate or reduce the risk for certain level. All this information has been revealed in the report. ඔගොල්ලෝ ඉගෙන ගන්න ඕන හොඳම ෆයිනෑන්ෂල් පැත්තට ඉගෙන ගන්න ඕන හොඳම දේ තමයි annual report එක කියනවා. report එක කිව්වොත් ඔයගොල්ලෝ ගොඩක් දේවල් ඉගෙන ගන්නවා. Even the financial accounting, even the non-financial. And another aspect you need to incorporate that is sustainability reporting. In the new curriculum, I think this subject will include the sustainability reporting as governance, risk management, ethics, and sustainability reporting. So that is why you are learning this subject. Even though this is very boring. Right? Because in your level, you are in the third level. The strategic level. That's why you are having the exemption for chartered accountancy exams for this up to strategic level. You are kind of nearer to the strategic level. So when you are answering to these questions, you are receiving the paper. So don't write the kind of a simple answers. So you need to write the answers with a helicopter view. What do you mean by helicopter view? So you need to overlook the topic. Helicopter view. So with that base only you have to answer. So therefore this subject is very difficult to pass. Not very much easy. Very difficult to pass. Last time when these students take this up. Very difficult problem, right? That is not my concern, right? Because this subject is very difficult. You have to understand this subject and pass. You are right. The answer. So that is why at the first day I need to give you what is the set of this subject. I think now you are having an idea. Even though this is boring, even though when you are doing some theoretical aspects, you feel sleep. The bar of mother pain only. You pass in the strategic level again, section number that basic level. Right? Clear? So sometimes this subject can be open subject. Open book. Reading open book to the open book. Good. Good or bad? Just open book. You can open book and write. Just open book. It's good. Yes. So when it comes to the strategic level charter, so you are having some open book subjects. Area. That's not. So what will happen when it comes to the open book? The kind of strategy that the exam is following to give the open book. Then what will happen in the examination? You are having a kind of pressure. Why? Exactly. Yeah. Right. What happens is both are clear. So what do you think? So what prospect you know? Photo book thing. But we photo deadline नहीं थे ना deadline नहीं थे. So when it comes to chartered exams, right? When it comes to APR subject, so there are so many books, right? There are 2 books for the audit, right? More than I think 2,000 pages, right? Right. Then you are having standard books, 3 standard books for the SLA part, for that okay. Right. Then 5 one so. Then you are having SLMs, corporate governance for the SLMs and the corporate governor, and SLMs for accounting. Now, all in the Gatra bus, then someone exam and Gamma, maybe our exam month and year and a half. There is no problem. Go exam and get a person. Exam in the Gatra, they go to have a million put what yet. They put to have a better put together, wow, have a thing of pain. It's like no sort of thing. Open. Why you know? So now you are having the trade. Again. Now, I go in. Put them come liar and not short. Short notes allow color in short notes liar and they give a content. Have a particular move. Look at the study text together. And the liar is over there. The text together. And the text together and make a million. I told them I'm sort of I'm going to do now. Oh, they did not. I'm going to paper number. I like a cross name. I'll have a standard. The amount of million other thing. Well, the standard book getting at and getting at it. And more than standard book got the go. 49. Right? Well, they got a Potagan, we know the hack. The Pote, you got Perla, we know it's particular. So the following cost the Pabag, the Potabella, Pabag. These are the material. In the open book exam, what you have to do is you have to study. You can use the books only for the references. Only for the reference. Because in the strategic level, right? The strategic level can identify the negative corporate strategic level again, strategic level can overload when we did a level again. CEO level again, not your comment that. So, overload case study. Business like a problem. Business a problem, current problem. Problem like where I get a solution there, they don't know why you then you can use some references, but you have to give the immediate solution. Now, that like the board of director meeting, why sugar, I mentioned sugar. I know both types of sugar. So you have to give the immediate Answer. That is what expected in the field. You don't want to look at the books. That is a one procedure, one strategy that examiners are following to fail. Open. Well, living happily, we are open. We don't want to study anything. But to fail because open. Sometimes this subject will be open, but I mean, open. What you have to do is you open. Right. All right. Right. So I'm moving to the today's discussion. Right after kind of a lengthy conversation answer. Right. I'm coming to the today's discussion. The risk management. What do you mean by risk management? So we can say R risk management. Risk management. කවුරුහරි ජීවිතේ කවදා හරි දවසක ඔයාගේ රිස්ක් එක මැනේජ් කරනවද? any situation. ඔයාලා රිස්ක් වලට ෆේස් කරලා තියෙනවද? Have you faced any risk? Yes. No. No. No risk. Zero risk. Yeah. Risk. You have faced risk. Right. Look, it's a kind of difficult. Yes, this you can't. This you can tell you how that you manage. How? It is insurance. So what is your risk? Life. You are having a life. Yeah. So you are having a life insurance. Yeah. Good. Right. Right. So when it's risk management, right? In the general life, so we are doing some risk management because we are facing the risk. But the risk can do you and bad. Right. In the company's perspective, without a risk, we can't do it. You have to definitely take the risk. Right. We call it as risk return trade-off. If you take high risk, you are receiving high return. Right. So you have to take the risk. Now, over the risk, then they take the risk. Right. If you are into risk, then you are going to Paying an inscable, Ogola, exam maker, exam failure. That's a risk. Right. That's the illegal static calendar. Somebody know that they calendar. The Bible is different. Very risky, general life. But when it comes to risk management, we are looking at the business perspective. Right? What are the risks we can face the business perspective and how we are managing it? How we are managing it. All right. So I will open up 4 point. There's an online people one in there. Can you hear? 003. So 03, can you hear me? Oh. Right. So when you're looking at this slide, what you can understand? Yes. What you can understand? Can you understand? Original. Right. Yes. Yes. What you can understand? Well, you are again. Now it is certainly. Yes. So again. Yes. What you can understand? Yes. There are some letters. Right. There are some letters. Right. So each of these letters is having a kind of idea. So when it comes to I will give you a tip, right? So each of these letters represent a modern world risk that companies face. Yes. So what is A? What is A stand for? A. A. A what? Apple. Yes. A for मतलब A. Artificial intelligence. AI. Right. AI. The modern world of business is facing the artificial intelligence risk. For example, let's say sub campus. Sub campus. So how the artificial intelligence is impacted for the sub campus? Yes. When it comes to your assignments, right? So you are using AI. GPT and other AI. So it's hard to access. Right? Hard to access. When it comes to group report, we can't access. Because you are using the GPT and other sort of AI language. And when it comes, let's say, audit firms, how this AI is affected. When they are doing auditing, yes, some falsification statements can be made there. So the reverse trend coming from the AI is what? AI agent. AI agent. What do you mean by that? AI agent. Instead of that, you can create an agent. Instead of you can create an agent. Where you put agent in it. Right. What he can do? He or she. දැන් ගත්තොත් අපි දැන් ඔයගොල්ලෝ ඊමේල් එකක් આવත් ඔයගොල්ලෝ මොකද කරන්නේ? chat GPT එකට දාලා ඊමේල් එකට ආන්සර් දෙන්න. අර ඒක දාන්න. කොහොමද කරන්නේ මිනිස්සු කස්ටමර් කෙනෙක්. AI agent කෙනෙක් ආවට පස්සේ AI agent අපි appoint කරනවා. For example, you can appoint the AI agent to go to the lecture site. Instead of you, he will learn. Hello. Lecture we do the right. මොකද AI එඩිට් කරන්නේ. අපිට පුළුවන් යාව හදන්න. අපිට ඊමේල් එකක් ආවොත් ඒක රිස්පොන්ස්. ඒ ඊමේල් එක ආවට පස්සේ යා ඔටෝමැටිකලි රිස්පොන්ස් අපිට මුත් කරන්නේ. ඒ වගේම ලෙක්චර්ස් වලත් යා ඒවා ලෙක්චර්ස් වල යා ෆෝන් නෝට්ස් ටික අරගෙන that is AI agent. You don't do anything. What you have to do is just you need to put the prompt correctly. Then AI agent will behave correctly. That's a newer trend. So the AI is coming up in a very big way, creating some great risk to the companies. And one example is that in a Dubai airport, so nowadays they are legal. So they are claiming that why you need to have a passport, a physical passport here for traveling. You have to have a passport. International one time. Passport. So the Dubai people are asking why we need to have a what you call the passport. Because we are in a personal biometric. Personal biometric. Now, even though you are having points, we are having a type of personal biometric. For example, we are having a different sort of fingerprint. So, why we need to have a separate identification document? Everyone, each of you having a different kind of biometric. So that is there. What they have done? So they are doing an experiment. They are building up a tunnel. Right? So what you have to do? You are get down from the aeroplane. Right? So you need to work through the tunnel. So when you work through the tunnel, using the biometric recognition, they will identify you. And they will give the access to work without any single hit. So what you have to do is you need to include your biometrics to the system. The biometric is not valid, they are not indexed. So that is a one AI tech. Now, podi කාලේ දුන්න ෆොටෝ එක දැන් ඊට ෆොටෝ එක දුන්න. ඔයාලට අඳු ගන්න බැහැ. එන මේ කැම්පස් එකේ ෆස්ට් ඉයර් ආවට ඒක ඔයාලා කියන්න බෑ. ඉන්න මම වෙනස් වෙන සාමාන්‍ය වෙනස් නෝන જાතිය තමයි පිළිගන්නේ. එහෙමද? ඒකල දැන් මට වෙන දේවල් නෙමෙයි. සාමාන්‍ය අදරුත් වෙනස් වෙන සාමාන්‍ය අඩුයි. වෙනස් වෙන ඥාන ළමයි ඒක දේවල් කරනවා. අමාරට ඔය ෆස්ට් ඉයර් අපිට කියනවා ඔය ෆෝර්ත් ඉයර් දී අඳුර ගන්න බැරි වෙනවා. හතරක් මට දෙක පාරම දෙක අවුරුදු හතරක ඉඳලා අවුරුදු ඒක අඳුර ගන්න බැරි. හැබැයි there's a AI technology, right? If you feed your let's say 3 months photo with the current photo, right? So they can identify whether this person is same. Someone but AI having technology. That kind of huge technology the AI is there. Therefore, this might put great risk to the companies in future. Yeah. Sometimes the audit firms in EY, I think, they have using the robot to the housing sort of to see the AI factor. Some greater risk is created through the AI. That is one. Then B for yes. Yeah. I'm discussing about the businesses. It's a kind of sort of before what? Before what? Before more. Don't answer it. Make a cunning digestion got the answer. Yes. Big data. What do you mean by big data? What do you mean by big data? Yes, big data. So when it's called Facebook, right? Let's say you go and search in a Google, you go and search cake. Then you are moving to the Facebook. What will happen? Facebook, you can see the cakes. Only cakes. Right? How it's come? Because of the big data. They are analyzing the big data. Now, what is that? Here are අපි WhatsApp එකේ දානකොට කාටවත් දෙන්නේ නැහැ. Google එකේ like they are storing because they are in the data. So next concern is when it comes to big data. So when it comes to WhatsApp annual report, let's say WhatsApp conference annual report. So what is the biggest asset they are having? WhatsApp conference annual report or the financial statement? What's the biggest asset they are having? WhatsApp. Obviously data. Data is the biggest asset they are having. But when it comes to financial reporting, still we are searching for way to recognize the data in the financial statement. And data කියන එක financial statement වල recognize කරන්න එක තමයි ඊළඟ standard එක. Next time. කොහොමද අපි recognize කරන්නේ? ඔයගොල්ලෝ හිතන්නේ financial standards එන්නේ ඒගොල්ලෝ දුලියට දාන financial standards. එහෙමද? එහෙමද? එතන ඉන්න ගමන් මතක් කරනවා අපි financial standards එක හදන්නකොට. Every standard is having a reason. For example, SLFR 60. SLFR 60. But understand. You guys are not doing financial accounting. You are coming from the mathematics. The bio. Yes. SLFR 60. Yes. Leases. Right? So previously, for the leases, what is the standard we are having? LKS 7. LFR 16 and the Galle. LKS 17 can standard. LKS 17 until LFR 16 or yes, it is. In the LKS 17, right? In the LKS 17, we are recognizing two types of leases: operating lease and finance lease. Right? You can remember. Right? If it is operating lease, right? If it is operating lease, we are not recognizing as it. We are just set off through the PA. We are not cut off the right? Right. So there is a one big company in America, which is an aeroplane company. Aeroplane company. So what they are doing is their main business is doing some transportation to their aeroplanes. So what is their biggest asset? Aeroplanes. But what they have done, all the aeroplanes are in operating leases. Operating leases are the aeroplanes are. Financial statement balance sheet. Asset aeroplanes pension. Right? According to the LKS 17, we are just charging to the PN. Rent again, so there is no assets. How we are generating profit? Through the aeroplanes using this assets. So when you are creating the ROA, return on asset of this company, that is very high. Why? They are using a minimum level of assets and generating a high return because they are not recording the aeroplanes in the asset. Return on asset is very high. So if I am an investor, I'm going to invest in this company, but I'm looking at ratios. When I'm looking at the ratios, ROI is very high. So then I think that company is very good. Then I will invest. That will mislead the investor. So that is why from the SLA 516, they are saying that there is no more operating reserves and there is no separation between operating reserves and the financial lease. All the leases are financial lease. So what you have to do, if there is a lease, you have to recognize the asset as a right of use. So now what we have, the aeroplanes we recognize as right of use as a legal arrangement. So now the correct ROA balance will come. Right? So that is the main issue why they have shifted from the case 17 to the SLA price. So likewise, every standard is having a line of story. So likewise, for the risk management also, right? So you need to look at what are the risks in the companies, what are the stories behind the companies. So the retail is one. Then see, so I'm very fast on cyber security. Right? Cyber security. Right? Cyber security also very important. Right? For example, when it comes to the insurance companies, let's say Union Insurance, PLC. Right? What they are doing? Union Insurance PLC. Selling money. What they are doing? Doing life insurance. Right? They are doing life insurance. Their main business is life insurance. So let's say the one insurance is the Union Insurance. Insurance is the amount. What is it? Insurance लाभ करना है हम लोग बात लगा रहे हैं insurance terminal बस करें तो लाभ आई करता है नहीं insurance अब इतना proposal करें वहाँ से वाला नर्मो पर insurance ini begini नर्मी हमारे proposal sampai उड़ने ना proposal आगे artinya memang itu proposal tapi kami dilar itu yang hari ini proposal mereka polisi kan dia kemudian yang bagi information sedikit kalau ni sistem ni kan mengenai kau dan mau dari wilayah dan memberi para perempuan dari wilayah lalu mengenai kau bisa kan information sedikit baik dan dari wilayah cyber attack ni ये cyber attack ni नाम देना पड़ेगा कवर करने का ठीक नहीं कितना आगे तो आगे किधर मागे वाईफाई कर लो मेरा वाईफाई मेरे क्या क्या होता तो नाम ना पता कुछ करना right ये वेल बोल so those are the cyber attacks so there are so many cyber attacks happen to the companies in Sri Lanka but because of the ERF framework they have actually overcome those because of the ERF हमारा midnight के cyber attack करो इधर तो मैंने तो मिला ये report meeting करना midnight ये वाली cyber attack करो दे इतना नहीं clear करना इधर तो बैंक चेक करना cyber attack करो मामा deposit करना देना 1 million आगे 1 million तक manage करेंगे तो आगे 1 million है उदय में दिन है कौन वो ये नहीं कोई ना बैंक को कर रहे इसा मेरे डाले का नहीं ठीक है तो मैं रिस्क मैनेजमेंट ही करेंगे cyber security is one of the greater risks nowadays the people for the companies are facing cyber security then D what Go. Yes. Digitalization. Digitalization. So what do you mean by digitalization? So in 2020 or 21, I can't remember exact date. 2020 or 21. COVID-19, 2021. These are the key names. So once the COVID-19 came, so actually I am doing audit in Ultrex Cement. Well, I can remember it's coming in March. So Ultratech Cement audit is the annual report date is December 31st. Right. So we have to finish off the audit before the new year. Right. So we are in the middle of the audit. So suddenly the COVID-19 came. So now isolations is coming up, right? As a what do you call it? Right. So we can't do it. Not finalize it. So what is going on? So then only the MS team is coming up. So Microsoft Teams. There's no Zoom. Zoom is not popular. After October 2021, not far. Then the MS teams, through the MS teams, we are working from home, and we are doing some coaching, and we are contact with the project quality clients. So likewise, we have finished off the audit using the digital front. So likewise, digitalization nowadays playing a major role. Everything is digitalized. Everything is digitalized. Even the sometimes I think in next 10 years time, there is no more money. Cryptocurrency and the kind of currency will come out. One common currency will come up to the whole world to do the transaction. Right. So likewise, the legalization coming up. Right. So we need to look at the risk related to legalization. Then R is the other risk we are having, like you said, the business risk, the risk we are having. Like business risk we are having. And E is for what? E. So you have learned this last week. Ethics. Ethics. E for it. And finally, the environment will come in. S for sustainability. Right. Sustainability. What do you mean by sustainability? Yes, sustainability. Any idea? Sustainability. So you have to answer. දැන් බණ කියනවා තවල මොකද තේරුණාද සාදු හරි කියනවා දැන් බණ කියති ඉතින් ආගෙන දැන් කම්පියුටර් වල සාදු කියනවා ඒ වගේ මොනවා හරි අකුවම කියන්නේ බඩේ මේක සබ්සයිඩ් yes yes sustainability බඩේ මේක sustainability what sustainability sustainability අපිට දැන් තියෙන තත්ත්වය වල නාගල පරම්පරාවල කරන්නේ keeping the same thing in the future. That is sustainability. Right? So without sustainability, companies can't survive. Right? You need to maintain the sustainability. That is also another risk we have. So these are the main risks that companies is normally have. I think I mentioned these are the kind of common things for this. Right? According to the modern world of risk. Right? So now I think you are having kind of idea about the risk. Right? So then you are going to learn the risk management. Right? So today's discussion, now only I come to the discussion. So today's discussion, we are discussing about the risk management. What is the meaning of the risk management? and the risk management process. Right. Risk management approaches and methods and risk reporting process and risk organization. Right. So in this area, and each session, when I'm doing each session, I will highlight what is the point I'm going to ask question from you. So in this chapter, let's say, my main focus is on the risk management process. How we are going to manage it. That is a kind of a main focus in your examination. All right, risk. So what do you mean by risk? So you can see one person is going to jump. So he is having a risk or not? Risk or risk? So what do you mean by the risk? Chance of loss or an unfavorable outcome associated with the action. So that is we call it as but risk. Then we have money see, we have better chance. Somebody risk. Chance of loss or an unfavorable outcome associated with an action. If you are performing action, through that action, if you are having any unfavorable outcome or loss, we call it as risk. Right. So when the uncertainty is greater, the risk is greater. If you are in uncertainty, අවිනිශ්චිතතාවයක් තියෙනවනේ. but risk එක වැඩි. Uncertainty is greater, the risk is greater. දැන් ඔයාලා ගත්තොත් මෙයා ඉතින් jump කරන්න. එයාට වැඩි sure එකක් නැහැ මෙයා jump කරගන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ. එතකොට මොකද? එතන risk එක වැඩි. right? ඉතින් මේක ඉතර දුර නැහැ. මෙයාට ඒක ලේසියෙන්ම පයින්න පුළුවන්. right? Then uncertainty is lower, the risk is low. So how we are going to manage the risk? Risk management involves optimizing the expected outcome subject to the risk involved and the risk tolerance. What do you mean by that? Risk management involves optimizing the expected return subject to the risk involving and risk tolerance. What do you mean by risk tolerance? Risk tolerance. What do you mean by risk tolerance? Tolerate risk tolerance. For example, let's say a big company and a small company. Let's say JKH and a small body car. Right. So who is having the high risk tolerance? Obviously, JKH. They can tolerate the risk kind of a high level. High level risk they can tolerate. The company is a big company. For example, if the government is impose tax, they can tolerate to someone. But when it's not body, let's say kind of a good body, right? The government is going to impose a tax. So what will happen? Sometimes they are wrong. That tolerance level is very low. So when it's on the risk management, right? The risk management is differ to one company to one company. Why? Because the tolerance level is different. So overall then, I'm a company එකම risk management strategy එක suggest කරන්න බෑ. බලන්න ඕනේ ඒ company එකේ තියෙන risk tolerance level එක. ඒ company එකේ තියෙන risk මොනවද? involved වෙලා තියෙන risk මොනවද? ඒ අනුව තමයි ඔයාගේ return එක optimize කරන්නේ. හොඳම return එක company එකේ තියෙන. ඔයාගේ risk evaluation. So that is what we are doing the risk management. Because when you are taking a decision, we know there is a risk return trade-off. When you are doing the risk management, that also you need to look at. මොකද අපි දන්නවා risk return trade-off එකක් තියෙනවා. අපි වැඩිපුර risk එකක් ගන්න මොකක්ද? We will get the return. So when you are managing, that should also help. ඒක දිහා බලන්න. Therefore, this risk management process is not very easy task. If you believe me, the compliance officer and the risk management officer is paying high salary than the chartered accountant. Sometimes the manager for the account compliance officer and the risk officer. Because it's very difficult to do. It's an ongoing problem. You need to tally everything. So you have to look at the tolerance level. So while looking at the tolerance level, you need to look at the return. Everything you need to tally. Then only you can have a good risk management process in your business. So that is why it is very difficult. So when it comes to risk management, right? So this is the definition for the risk management. Right? So risk management is the process of identifying, assessing, and controlling threats to an organization, capital, and earnings. Right? So the risk management, what we are doing, first of all, we need to identify the risk what we have. Then we need to assess. After identifying the risk, what is the level, whether it's a high risk, low risk, or moderate risk. Right? We need to assess. And based on that assessment, we need to use the controlling strategies or managing strategies. So this is a kind of a process. So what are the risks when we are facing in a company? Financial uncertainties, legal liabilities, strategic management errors, accident and natural disasters. Like when it comes to financial uncertainties, you are having some financial difficulties when it comes to your business. Legal liabilities, for example, you are having some legal concerns is coming up. One example is when it comes to the so I have done audit in a Galle Graphite Lanka PLC. Have you heard about the Galle Graphite Lanka? No. Galle Foundries? No. Galle Foundries are actually. Right. Right. Great. So there's a former hero called Galle Foundries. Right. He lived in the Galle. What do you call the kind of a mining field. Galle Graphite Lanka PLC is a company in Lanka. It's a PLC company. What do we mean by PLC company? It's a public limited company. So if it is a public limited company, what we have to do? We have to issue shares to the general public. But Galle Graphite Lanka PLC not issuing any share to general public. Why? It's a PLC company. Even though it's a PLC company, they are not issuing shares. So when it comes to Galle Graphite Lanka, right? So what they are doing is they are doing the mine, right? They are situated top of a mountain, right? And the Gurudama they enable factory. And they are coming to so they actually do not meet up graphite. Then make a local accepted one party because in Sri Lanka, the Sri Lanka graphite says 99% is having the carbon. Carbon percentage is very, very graphite on that. Lanka is one of the graphite. So Lanka is one of the sulfur. So what happened to this? So in 2000, one of the great kind of a president, I'm not going to say the name at that time, right? Want to say this? The foreign company. But they can't do it. Why? According to the regulations, you can't say the government doesn't. But he has done. Right? He made this, it has public limited company and asked to issue share registered as a PLC company and asked to issue shares. Once they have issued the shares, that potential buyer, the German company, buy all the shares. How to shares So now the 99% of shares is owned by the German company. Only one share is owned by Sri Lankan government. Yeah, this is happy. So they have buy this company in 2000. Up to today, they are not issuing any share. They are not selling any share. The German company is owning the company. The Google and Sri Lanka. So when you are looking at the annual report, you can't see, you can't see that any debt is not there. Any debt liability is not. දැන් අපි ඉගෙන ගන්න තියෙන ෆයිනෑන්ෂල් මැනේජ්මන්ට් එක අනුව ණය ගන්න එක හොඳයි. ඒක අපේ ඒක තමයි. මේකේ බියුටි එක තමයි පුතා. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ගත්තොත් එහෙම අපි ග්‍රැෆයිට්ස් මොකටද ගන්නේ? ඉතින් මොකටද ගන්නේ? බද යූස් එක පුතා. එස් ඊළඟ වලින් කරලා ඊළඟට අපි කියනවා බ්ලැක් හෝල්. ඊළඟට මොකද? This break. Well, this is well. Mata una base no hay. Yes. Pencil. Pencil. Okay. Nice. Kalau tahu dah itu tu, yes. Central ada anda German company yang kami. Cerama ni company kami. Kenapa? Again, memang transaksi menjadi daya store. Cancel ada negara, cancel ada negara, cancel ada negara ni itu itu Galle ni pun kudu Galle, tapi cancel ada negara. Carbon wali bagi program ni brake pad ada. Kata Lanka ni German company mainly itu produce kerana Audi, BMW. Oh sorry, okay. The wahan brake pads ada ni. Graphite. There are yellow කරන්නේ මේ graphite පොට්ටි හදන. control ඉතින් හදන්න තමයි යවන්නේ. ඊළඟට tubes වගේ හදලා යවන්නේ. ඒ ලංකාවේ මේක යවන්නේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් අපි හිතමු ලක්ෂයකට කියන tube එක 1 ton tube එක ලක්ෂයකට. හැබැයි ඒගොල්ලෝ sell කරනවා මේක. බිලියන 5කට වඩා වැඩි. ලංකාවේ export කරන්නේ 100,000. Ada yang boleh generate ke mana paling. Mana kalau Jerman mungkin dia ada kan Jerman sekali. Dan legal question tu Jerman. Sama yang awak mereka dapat jual mana? Jadi kalau 2000 mana ini, ya estimate kerana mereka 30 years mereka yang mana? Dapat 30 years mereka yang mana? Amerika tidak itu tahan mereka. Yeah, others tahu and while I'm there, right, they have identified surface level graphite. Yani kalau maran tu ni, kan tu udah graphite sih. Maran tu ni. Legana hostel kan? So jadi kan dia tu kilometer ni kan maran far lagi. Tapi biasa. Time kalau balik. Pasti load di berarti layak yang jalan hotel pilih pun dalam perlu. Karena apa yang orang lain kalau standar sudah apa ada? Kalau ada, jadi ada ni video. Load mereka hamarak tahu tinggal. Anda. Hamarak ya, kita sama ni gold festival ini. Gold festival ni apa ni? Jadi थोड़ा ये वाके इनकम रेट जनरेट करना असेस्टिंग मतलब इतना गेम और इशू है तो हमें लीगल लागे इतना वैलेंस टाइम तो सबको मिली तो इतना लोगों को $5 की तरह फॉलो जाता है करना कोई गाड़ी का ऑप्शन है ये वाला सोशल फैंस को नहीं तो मैं ये डाल उसमें लगता है कि ये डालना काम वो कहते हैं अरे हमारे पंगे का दाव तो नहीं डाल अरे हमारे तो एक ही ना बैठक करने बात की है एक लोग ट्रेन क्यों नहीं है एक लोग का बहुत सारी आवश्यकता है हमारी ये मत को एक लोग पागल का बैठा ना ट्रेन करती है at least not the trainer. Without training to an extent. We get some, there are so many legal issues. Payments for the minister of the Gavana. Right. Or they come up for it, the business review. You government, you are the business. Or a Galle, Galle, jobs. That's a bullet. I mean, this is a good thing on it. I will land at the government. We are in Harvard. They are in Harvard of London. So this is everything. It's a job. They call it 70,000 for a golden game. First salary. For the salary. They are the then this is not the power. So they got legal cases, legal liability. The legal liability in the summer they will do because for risk legal issues. Legal pay. Because they are using some people to work. They are extracting the graphite 24 hours. I see the graphite color. That's how the companies are doing. So in that company, the main risk is the legal liability there. People legal liability. And strategic management errors, sometimes you will be having the company is going to implement a new product. Right? That product can be failed. This is strategic management error. Sometimes your company is going to acquire another company, but that company is failed. That's a strategic management. Okay. So those are the risks. Accident and natural disaster. Right? Suddenly the campus falls down. So we are the tsunami is coming up. Can you be able to see them? A buyer then with that for in the there. So natural disaster. And IT security threats and data related things. So those are some examples. Right. So these are the definitions. I'm not going to describe the definitions. Not very important. Like, so this is the important part. Right. This is the most important part. Right? Right? Right. So this is the risk management process. Right. I will take a simple example to just to illustrate. Right. Don't get it. So feel coming to Galle chemistry. Saman, then I will think a little bit than great operating chemistry. So you have learned the risk management today. So what are the risks you are having when you are going to approach a girl asking for boys? What are the risks? What are the risks? What are the risks? Ishan. So after completing that chapter, you are. Yes. Apa dia dia? Pulau juga. Apa dia risk pulau? Micro risk ya kan? Jalan itu dari jalan mana? Tahu tak ini? Apa polisi? Risk. Okay. Boleh. Ya. Tapi kalau SI ni kita SI ni mudah. Pertama, kita lihat dia. Lihat dia. Yes, another risk. Ada. Kalau ada kalinya already boyfriend getting involved, then boyfriend getting. So risk. That's it. I again, right? I again. Come to this one, okay? I again. So those are the lists. So what we have identified. So first of all, in the risk management process, you need to establish the context. You need to identify the environment you are going to play. Right? Establish the context. So you have to identify the context, environment basically. Through the environment, you are going to identify the risks you are having. Right? So that instance we have identified there are 3 risks I'm having when I approach a girl, right? Father, brother, and the potential or the existing boyfriend and for the future boyfriend or past boyfriend or something like that. So 3 risks we have identified. So then we need to do the what? What do you mean by assessment? We need to grade the risk. For example, first risk, he is having a father, who is a police officer. So when it comes to risk, it's a high risk. Low risk, high risk, let's say. Right. Then boyfriend, who had done the low risk. Then brother, gym running. So high risk. Right? So you assess the levels of risk. High, low, medium, or moderate, likewise. You can assess the level of risk you have. So then, based on the risk assessment, you need to treat the risk. Potential risk treat. So how we can treat? What is the way? So let's say now I need to ask out from that girl. But she is always going with her path. There's no possibility. What I can do? What I can do? What is the risk treat? I can transfer this risk to someone else. How? I will appoint my friend. I ask him to ask. Go and ask the team. Then I will transfer my risk to someone. I can transfer. And when it comes to the brother, he is always going with brother. Like I get the that goes අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම ගොඩ ගන්න තියෙන possibility අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම sure 100% sure. ලියුමක් දුන්නත් කාත් එක යවුවත් අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම අහු වෙනවා. So what is the risk treatment? The risk treatment. We can avoid. අහන්න දුන්නා. මොකද තියා මුටි කර. එක මාළු දෙන්න කියලා. You can avoid. Transfer, avoid. Then, what are the other studies? We can reduce. Right. Yeah, I take මම එකයි යනවා අයියගේ ජිම් එකේ කෝච් මාස්ටර්. This training කරනවා. දැන් තොරට අඩු කරනවා. mitigate. This is used for mitigate. That is one. Mitigate or reduce. Then, what is the next risk treatment? What is the next treatment? But, let's go through the problem. You can accept risk. You can accept it. How? Without common name on Ilam, Utica common name, Ilam. Accept risk. Many people come. So those are the treatments. Risk treatments. First of all, we need to establish the context. That means we need to identify the environment. Right? First of all, we need to identify the environment. Then we need to identify the risk from the environment. Then, that identify risk, we need to assess whether the risk is high, low, or moderate. Right? Based on that identification, we need to provide the treatment for the each risk. Right? And afterwards, after providing the what you call the risk treatment, it's not ended up. We need to review and re-evaluation of the plan. Right? Our treatments there are process. අපිට අපෝ consider කරලා බලන්න. මොකද මේක ongoing process එකක්. උදාහරණයක් විදිහට මම risk එක reduce කරන්න gym එකේ අයියත් එක්ක යනවා. දැන් නම් එක අයියා හම්බෙන්නේ. මොකද වෙන්නේ? gym එකේ අයියා මට වඩා උත් එක යනවා. දෙන්නම උතුල මට ගන්න. So you need to review well again. You need to plan. So again you are going back to the context. So this process is an ongoing process. Right? This process is an ongoing process. So let's apply this to company. අපි කතා කරන company perspective exam එක ලියන්න පවෝ. Right? අල්ල බලනවා. So when it comes to the risk management process, so you need to look at the company's perspective. Right? Company's perspective. So how we can establish the context? So when it comes to this business, you need to look at the internal and the external environment. Okay? You need to identify the risks relating to environment. For example, let's say I'm doing a business in a highly regulated area, healthcare sector. I'm producing a medicine. What kind of risk I'm having? A medicine other company. That is my context. I'm in the healthcare sector. The one risk I'm having is a safety risk. Safety risk. What do you mean by safety risk? Safety risk. And also we have a compliance. We have to comply with the standards when you are making the medicine. So likewise, there are some risks we can identify in the context. So then we need to rate the risk, or we need to assess the risk, whether this risk is high level risk, low level risk, and a moderate level risk. So based on that assessment, we have to do what? We have to treat the risk, or we can say we have to respond to the risk. We have to respond to the risk. So how we are responding? Let's say I'm having compliance risk. What I can do? What is the strategy we can follow? We have to definitely take that risk, because if you are not following the compliance, you can't take the medicine. So what you can do? Through the internal controls, you can mitigate the compliance risk to somewhat. You can have a good internal controls to make sure that all the protocols are followed when you are making a medicine. That's a one risk treatment for that risk. Right. So then again, you need to review whether these internal controls are adequate enough to achieve that objective. Compliance achieve very enough internal controls established. Protocols are process sort of internal controls are doing. अब आए बालन नोने आए रिलीव कल बालन नोने नाला दिने के adequate enough. जब ना तब आए context के बालन आए identify करना about this process again. So therefore, we can find the risk management process is a but ongoing process. That's a no indeed. They can become a writer. Doctor can job better. Risk manager, compliance officer. Job. Doctor on call in the bed. Specialist method on call in. On call in again. Only Canadian in. Delivery. On call in. Only out there and specialist class हमारा है. दंडे आने करते special knowledge के भी. तरी को लोग निवारण भी करते हैं. तरी operation निकाल होता है kan on call. ये वाके तमाम risk management करना official था. company එකට කොයි වෙලාවද district අපි දන්නේ නැහැ කොයි වෙලාවද district එකේ. අද company highly performing වෙනවා. හැබැයි එකපාරට සුනාමි කියලා ගහගෙන. ඒක උදේ. risk කියන එක මේ වෙලාවේ වෙනස් වෙනවා. මොකද අපි ඉන්නේ changing environment. දෙමෙන් දෙනවා. Therefore, the ongoing process and a very difficult process to do. The process. Now I think you have a kind of idea about the risk management. Alright, so shall we have a break? How many minutes? How many? What's that? 5 minutes. So 2 minutes. 2 minutes break. 10 minutes. Take 50 minutes break. We'll back to the 250. They were 30 seconds off. Belum panggil tuh, baik, baik. Belum panggil. Jadi baru kalau bensin itu pun bensin. Jadi dia. Paling nih. Oh, jadi kadang tuh. Pero kalau lo udah lagi, ada dari lah.
Graduation degree चाली, हमें चाली कनेक्ट करेगा ना?
Yeah. 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 Labor? Yeah, yeah. So why why you should not? Why you not? You call the okay. Yeah, no. If it is not marked, you can show them. No. Cycle in our Hello.
मेरे को बोले सोशल
Right. Any questions are there? Up to date. Okay. Right. So we have discussed about the risk management, right, process, right? So under the risk management process, we have discussed about few points, right? Establishment of the context, identification, assessment, and potential risk treatment, And finally, you need to review and evaluate the plan. Right? Right? Right. So under the establishment of the context. Right? So those who are doing other work can leave the class. So there you can have to lecture. Otherwise, you can leave and do your work. I'm not worrying about that. But I'm worrying if you are doing anything the other work in the class. Right. Yes. So under the establishment of the context, I have told you, right? So we need to look at the environment. The purpose of this stage of planning enables to understand the environment, right? So you need to understand the environment in which the respective organization operates. That means to thoroughly understand the external environment and the internal culture of the organization. So understanding the environment means what? You need to understand both the internal and external environment. So then only you can establish the context. Well, මුලින්ම දැනගන්න ඕන ඔයා work කරන context එක මොකක්ද? Right. So after identifying the context, the external environment or the internal environment, so then you can identify the risk, right? Identify the risk, right? Identifying the risk is very crucial because it is a foundation for the risk management process, right? Because if you are not identifying the risk correctly, that is the biggest risk you have, right? ඔයා හරියට risk එක identify කරගන්න නැති එක තමයි වට තියෙන ලොකුම risk එක. Right? So therefore, the identification of the risk is very crucial because it is a foundation, right? Risk එක තියෙන foundation එක. Right? දැන් අපිට හරියට ගෙදරක foundation එක දැම්ම නැත්නම් මොකද වෙන්නේ? ගෙදර කඩන්න. Right? So likewise, this is very important. Right? So because we need to focus on the proper comprehensive knowledge, we need to have to identify the risk. Risk එක identify කරගන්න ඕන what a specific knowledge එකක් තියෙනවා. Risk management knowledge එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒක තමයි compliance officers ලා risk management officers ලාට ඒ සම්බන්ධව specialized knowledge එකක් තියෙනවා. Right? So otherwise you can't understand. For example, let's say you are going to identify a finance risk, financial related risk. So engineer can't identify the financial risk. So he needs to have a accounting knowledge to identify the financial risk. For identifying the operational risk, you need to have a operational level knowledge. Otherwise, you can't identify. So therefore, if you are going to identify the risk, you need to have a different sort of comprehensive knowledge. For example, when it comes to legal actions, so you are having a legal issue, right? You are having the legal issue. So let's say if you are having a legal issue, right? So chartered accountant can't look at the legal issue. We need to have a lawyer. Right? We need to have a lawyer to look at the legal issue. So likewise, when you identify the risk, we need to have a comprehensive knowledge. And how do you identify the risk? How much of the risk is identified? Some techniques are there. How do you identify the risk? Yes. So one way is what? Brainstorming. What do you mean by that? You can ask from the experts. For example, in your company, there's a legal case is there, right? So we don't know whether we win the case or lose the case, right? Risk එකක් තියෙනවා, legal case එකක් තියෙනවා. අපි දන්නේ මේ legal case එක දිනයිද නැද්ද? Right? අපිට ඒ ගැන knowledge එකක් නැහැ. So what we can do? We can ask from a lawyer. What are the possibilities? Whether we can win this or yes, we will lose this. Brainstorm. You can ask from the experts. Right? What is the risk there? And we can do the interviews. Right? Through the interviews, we can identify the risk. Right? Interviews. You can do the, let's say, when you identify the customer risk. Right? For example, you are having a bakery shop. Now the sales is not good in a good way. It's not behaving in a good way. So what we can do? You can interview. You can ask from the customer whether your preference are changing. You can interview. So then you can identify the main reason for that decline of revenue is customer preference on this changing. So interview. Checklist. You can have a checklist. Right? For example, when it comes to internal control, compliance protocols, you can have an internal control. දැන් හිතන්නකෝ බේස් පදනවා කියලා. බේස් පදවලදී එක ඉන්ග්‍රීඩියන්ට්ස් දාන levels තියෙනවා. මේකේ මිලිමීටර් 5යි වගේ තියෙනවා. ඒතර වගේ ඉන්ටර්නල් කන්ට්‍රෝල් එකක් තියෙනවා, ප්‍රොටෝකෝල් එකක් තියෙනවා. ටික බලලා හරියට දාන්න. ඒක වගේ චෙක්ලිස්ට් එකක් හදාගන්නවා. හරියට වගේ ඉන්ටර්නල් කන්ට්‍රෝල්ස් එකක් තියෙනවා. There is no such thing, so it will mark in the checklist. So then you can identify it as a risk. And scenario analysis. You can do a scenario analysis. මේක මෙහෙම වුණොත් මේ වගේ රිස්ක් එකක් තියෙනවා. මේක මෙහෙම වුණොත් මේ රිස්ක් එකක් තියෙනවා. මම ෆේල් වුණොත් එක්සෑම් එක මට මෙහෙම රිස්ක් වෙනවා. මම ෆේල් වුණොත් මට චාර්ටර් වල ස්ට්‍රැටජික් එක ගන්න බෑ. නැත්නම් මට ඉස්සරහට යන්න බෑ. ක්ලාස් එකේ වෙන කරගෙන ඉන්නොත් එහෙම මේක පාස් වෙන්න බෑ. පේපර් එක දුන්නට පස්සේ මතක් වෙන්නේ. මේ කියුව එක. දැන් මේ ජෝක් කියන්නේ මම මේ පළවෙනි දවසේ ඉඳන් ඉඳන් නැත්නම් ගෙලෙ බෙලි. ඒක නෝ එක්ස්කියුස් එක. අදාළ කවුරුත් right scenario analysis කරනකොට right අපිට බලන්න පුළුවන් එක එක scenarios වලදී මොනවද කියන risk උදාහරණයක් විදිහට මම අලුත් product එකක් හදනවා product එකේ units 1000ක් හැදුවොත් කොහොමද profit එක unit 1500ක් හැදුවොත් කොහොමද profit එක 2000ක් හැදුවොත් කොහොමද profit right so different scenarios we can analyze. So based on the scenario analysis, we can decide what kind of risk we are having. එකක scenarios analyze කරනවා. දැන් අපි කලින් ගත්ත උදාහරණ right. යාන් ළමයාත් එක්ක තාත්තාව මොකද්ද scenario. යාන් ළමයාත් එක්ක අයියාව මොකද්ද scenario. right. කලින් boyfriend ආව මොකද්ද scenario. Can analyze scenario. Then direct observation. බලන් ඉන්නලා risk එක identify කරන්න පුළුවන්. direct observe කරනවා. Directly observe and I can identify the risk. For example, when you are doing the exams, right? So invigilators are there, so they are looking at what you are doing. They identify what risk. Direct observation. Then incident analysis, same as scenario analysis, and you can do a survey, right? You can do a market survey. For example, in your company, your market survey is deteriorating. So what you can do? You can send a survey and ask what is the reason for this from your customers or the suppliers and other stakeholders. Right. So likewise, using these different type of techniques, you can identify the risk. Right. Identify the risk. Then, after identifying the risk, what we have to do? We need to act. That means we need to categorize each risk into different levels. For example, let's say one risk is high level risk, low level risk, moderate risk. So how we can categorize? We need to look at the likelihood and the impact. What is mean by likelihood? The possibility of happening. Likelihood is possibility of happening. And impact? Impact can be a financial impact or something like volatile. So when you are assessing, we need to look at both likelihood and impact. So let's say there's a risk we have identified. The likelihood is very high and impact is very high. What we can do? සිදු වෙන්න පුළුවන් possibility එකක් වැඩි. ඒක සිදු වුණොත් එimhe impact එකක් වැඩි. So what is the risk frequency we can have? If the likelihood is high and the impact is also high. So අපි ගත්ත example එකේ අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම මට මුටි ගන්න තියෙන සම්භාවිතය වැඩි. අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම likelihood is high. මුටි ගාවට hospital අතර වෙන impact is high. So So what we can do? What is strategy? We can terminate, avoid. We can cancel it. That is the strategy. When it comes to business also, for example, business is going to acquire another company. Right? Your company is going to acquire another company. So when you are looking at this company, that company is loss-making company. And also, it's a high likelihood that companies become bankrupt in your future. Right? So what is the risk strategy? This treatment you can have. So you are not going to acquire the okay. You are terminating that activity. The likelihood that the effect is high. So let's say the likelihood is lower. But the impact is high. The impact is high. Likelihood is lower, but the impact is high. If it is happened, the impact is high. For example, Titanic. Titanic here, Galle nothing now. Have the impact of them? Impact of Galle have a growth. Have a cost. The Vana goes them. Vana got the Vana happen of them. Vana happened in the possibility of Lanka again at 20. So it's not a good thing. Make a sign on it. Vana happened over 1 lane. So the impact happen. Impact. So once we are having a likelihood is very low, but the impact is high, what we can do as a risk treatment? Likelihood is very low, the impact is very high. Yes? Yeah. I'm asking a strategy, but we cannot ask a business. The likelihood is very low, impact is high. What we can do? දැන් අප කලින් කතා කරපු එක්සැම්පල් එකේ දැන් පොළො පිටපොළ ටිකක් මම දන්නේ නැහැ. කලින් කතා කරපු එක්සැම්පල් එකේ මම ගෑනු ළමයි යාළුවෙක් අහද්දි තාත්තත් එක්ක යනවා. අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම කුටි කන්න තියෙන සම්භාව්‍යතාව වැඩි. හැබැයි තාත්තා යාව එක්ක ඉගෙන ලයික්ලිහුඩ් එක අඩුයි. ආව කුටි කන්න පුළුවන් ඉම්පැක්ට් එක වැඩි. Likelihood is lower, but the impact is high. What we can do? We can transfer like insurance. For example, the possibility of, let's say, a building, campus building. Campus building, they can the pool of Sambarita. Medina could in there, like this. Like to the Medina in there. Over the Angar mother, sooner with the Kalaman. So, let's just in there. Likelihood, if the likelihood is high, you are avoiding. If the likelihood is low, that means building never likelihood is low. But if it is falling down, what will happen? The impact is high. So what we can do? We can insure the building. We are transferring our risk to someone. The likelihood is lower and the impact is high. Because if it is happened, the impact is high. We have to bear that impact. So therefore, we are transferring the risk to someone. Right? Yes. And if the impact is low, but the likelihood is high. Impact is low, but the likelihood is high. What we can do? Impact is low. Likelihood is high. So they can stand up with the lights keep at the light there, down the dark, and the Put the lemon. If you love a pain, we light it down and light again. Likelihood high. The millions is very expected. So, what we can do to mitigate that? What is the risk? Reduce. How we can reduce? Through the internal. Through the internal. And the likelihood is low and the impact is low. Both are low. Likelihood is there, impact is low. So they can accident. So that is why this risk assessment is very important. So when it comes to the businesses, right? So you need to assess this risk correctly. Then why? Because otherwise your answer will be wrong. If you assess the kind of a risk, let's say there's a high risk, but you have assessed it as low risk. So what will happen? Your risk response will be wrong. Your whole risk management process will be wrong. Sometimes because of that, your company will be bankrupt. So therefore, this is a very much, you have to do it very much in a careful way. You need to have the knowledge. Right? So the assessment factor, this stage, you need to do it properly. Right? So when you are looking at the impact, so we can use the numerical values. But when it's a likelihood, we have to follow some statistical methods to measure the likelihood. Right? We will discuss in the next few weeks how we are deciding likelihood. So based on that, you need to decide the level of the risk, whether it's a high risk, low risk, or moderate, based on the likelihood and the. So then, treatments. These treatments. Right. After assessing the risk, whether this risk is high, low, or moderate, or something like that. Right. So we need to treat the risk. Right. We need to respond to the risk. After risk, we can response. Response risk aku legal yang orang ini belum. Apa yang terkait betul? Boleh fix. Kalau legal apa nak orang kita keluar dari yang awam ini kita sudah kita dia orang kita nak. So what you have to do? You have to treat the risk. So let's say we need to answer the risk response. So these are some 5 strategies we can answer to the risks. One is oil. Right? We are talking about dive curve. Right? Dive curve. What peanut of the dive curve and peanut of the dive curve. Peanut of the prodigal. Again, I have over children. Dive curve again. Dive curve again. The moon. What we are trying to still there to link the way. Dive curve. I mean, dive curve and Nagano, you want to be a chemical. Because the risk is the likelihood and the risk is the impact is high. So avoid. So when you apply this to the companies, right, like I told you before, right? So I'm going to acquire a company, right? So that company is loss-making company and high likelihood that that company can be bankrupt in near future. So I'm not going to acquire that company. Avoid or terminate the agreement. Sometimes now I have an agreement with that company. When you are looking at the current risk, the risk is high and the likelihood is high. So then what we can do? Terminate the agreement. Terminate that. Then transferring. Right. So we are transferring our risk to the insurance. Right. For example, for my car, I am having insurance. Let's say for the factory, I'm having insurance. Why? Because the impact is high. There's a risk. So what I can do? I can transfer that risk. The insurance companies got them. The insurance companies will the Lanka or Minister the insurance companies, they have put up given. So then insurance companies. So look at 100. You're like a bar given man. It is a ego 3 insurance company. Ego to insurance company, insurance company. Global insurance companies on insurance company. For example, let's say you are insuring an aeroplane. Aeroplane Air India aeroplane why insure company. Lane company. Company lane ඉන්ෂුරන්ස් කම්පැනි ඒ කම්පැනි ප්ලේන් එක කරන් දෙනවා. තියෙන ඇග්‍රීමන්ට් එක කරන්න. මොකද වෙන්නේ ඉන්ෂුරන්ස් කම්පැනි ප්ලේන් එක කරන් දෙනියම් තමකට කම්පැනියට ගන්න බෑ. ඒ තරම් වටිනාකම වැඩි. તો ඒගොල්ලෝ මොකද කරන්නේ? ඒ රිස්ක් එක බෙයා කරන්න ඒගොල්ලෝ ඒක රීඉන්ෂුර් කරනවා. ඒගොල්ලෝ තව ඉන්ෂුරන්ස් කම්පැනි එක ඒවලම ඉන්ෂුරන්ස්. So through that we are transferring our risk. Insurance companies also having a risk. So therefore they are reinsuring. Transferring the risk. Then the retention. Retention. What do you mean by retention? Keeping some money with us to face the future risk. මේක ගොඩක් කරන්නේ companies වලට තොර ඔයගොල්ලෝ කරන්නේ. ඉස්සරහට එන්න පුළුවන් risk එක manage කරන්න. Saving එකත් නෙමෙයි retention. You are keeping a retention. You are keeping a retention. Then sharing. What do you mean by sharing? What do you mean by sharing? Then අර Galle මේ යාළුවෙන් අහන්න යද්දි මම තනියෙන් යන්නේ නැහැ. යාළුවෝ තුන් දෙනෙක් කරනවා. යවුවොත් එහෙම තුන් දෙනා බෙදාගෙන ටික. sharing. risk එක share කරනවා. How we can share the risk? We can register our company in the Colombo Stock Exchange. We can make it as a public limited company. So then what will happen? People will buy share. So once they are buying the share, the owners are, number of owners are, so will spread out the risk. Spread out the risk. Sharing the risk. Sharing the risk. And the loss prevention and reduction. Right? So how we can do? Internal controls. Through the internal controls, you can detect the risk. For example, fraud risk. Right? Fraud එක කරන්න පුළුවන් risk එක. කොහොමද අපි අඩු කරන්නේ? detect කරන්නේ හරි prevent කරන්නේ. Through the internal control. උදාහරණයක් විදිහට ඔයා හිතනවා cashier විදිහට වැඩ කරනවා. company. Company cashier විදිහට වැඩ කරනවා. Company cashier විදිහට වැඩ කරනවා. Company cashier විදිහට වැඩ කරනවා. Right. මොකද කරන්න පුළුවන්? දැන් අපිට සිකුරාදා cash balance කරන්න ඕන. Right. cash balance කරලා මට සල්ලි කිපයක් ගෙදරට ගන්න පුළුවන්. internal control නැත්නම්. sensor ආදිය විතර කරලා අපව සම්බන්ධ කරලා deposit කරනවා. We don't have any internal control. I will tell you one example. There's a visa company, right? It's a actual scenario. Visa company, there's a CFO. CFO කෙනෙක් හිටියා visa company එක. මේ CFO ට තමයි authority එක තිබ්බේ invoices හදන්න, payment කරන්න යාට authority එක තියෙනවා. Invoice වලට approval දෙන්න, ඊට පස්සේ යා payment එක ලියනවා, යා ඊට පස්සේ check එක ලියන්නේ, යා තමයි ඔක්කොම මේ process එක කරන්නේ, payment process. කවුරුත් නැහැ. වෙන කවුරුත් නැහැ. එයා මොකද කරේ? එයා මුලින්ම එයාගේ account එකට අපි හිතමු 10 million කියලා 10 million වගේ amount එකක් දාගත්තා. මොකද double entry මේ account එක සල්ලි ඉල්ලගෙන ගත්තාම company එකේ cash debit or credit. Cash credit and debit to kind of account, expense account or kind of account. The cash එළියට ගත්තා 10 million. එයා දන්නවා audit කරන අයගේ material level. Material level කියන්නේ දන්නවා. What do you mean by material level? මානාත්මක භාවය. Material level. What do you mean by material level? Material level කියන්නේ අපේ decision making වලට impact වෙන level එක. Decision making වලට impact වෙන level. ඒකට උදාහරණයක් තියෙනවා පස්සේ කියන්නේ. right? The material level එක දාන්න auditor. ඒ කියන්නේ එයා දන්නවා auditor check කරන amount එක. එයා මොකද කරන්නේ? මේ 10 million එක. අපි හිතමු material level එක company එක ලක්ෂය. material level එක company එක ලක්ෂය. ඒ කියන්නේ auditor check කරන්නේ basically කිව්වොත් auditor check කරන්නේ ලක්ෂයට වඩා උඩින් තියෙන transactions විතරයි. ඒ පල්ලෙන් transaction check කරන්නේ. මෙයා මේ අපි හිතමු 1 million. 1 million එක parts 20කට කඩනවා. 50000 ගානේ parts 20කට කඩනවා. Expenses accounts වලට දානවා. So now what is double it? Expenses accounts debit and cash. All the documents he has provided. He knows the auditor will not check this because it is below the material level. Why this happen? Because there is no internal control. That ඕන විදියට check එක issue කරගෙන එයාට ඕන දැනකට දාන්න පුළුවන් opportunity එක තියෙනවා. එයා ඒ විදියට ඒක බෝඩි කරලා program කරලා තියෙනවා. අන්තිමට external auditors like හොයාගත්තේ නැහැ internal auditors තමයි හොයාගත්තේ. ඉතින් මේ විශ්ව එකක් තියෙනවා. එයා කරලා තියෙන්නේ ලොකු amount එකක් එලිම ලියලා අරගෙන ඒක පොඩි calculator කරලා expenses වලට දානවා. එතකොට අපි check කරන්නේ නැහැ auditors. auditors check කරන්නේ high level එකේ transaction විතර. ලක්ෂ $. හැබැයි යා මේ කඩලා දාලා තියෙන හින්දා ඒක aggregate විදිහට එන්නේ නැහැ. That is how people are doing frauds. There's a known so to prevent and detect the what you call the frauds or the risk, right? We can have the loss prevention and detection strategies like internal control. Right? So these are the risk treatments we can have. Right? Let's come to this one. Risk treatment. Right? So then, after having the risk treatments, so now everything is okay. What do we do? අපි හිතනවා නිකන් ඔක්කොම හරියට. දැන් අපි risk එක environment එක identify කරගත්තා. risk එක හරියට බැලුවා. right? environment එක identify කරගත්තා. ඊට පස්සේ risk එක identify කරා. ඊට පස්සේ ඒක assess කරා. ඒක හරියට treat කරා. response කරා. දැන් හරියට. Everything is clear. Is it? No. We have to again review. Then අපි company එකක් අපි ගත්තොත් company එකක් අපි acquire කරන්න යනවා. ඒ company එකේ risk එක උත් නැහැ, life impact එකක් නැහැ, life impact එකක් නැහැ. එහෙනම් අපි acquire කරනවා. acquire කරන්න decide කරනවා. හැබැයි suddenly economic condition එක change වෙලා. right? මේ company එක ආපහු bankrupt වෙන්න නැත්නම් So, my risk treatment here, I'm change that. I have to change the risk rate. So therefore, I have to do a review. Right? You need to evaluate the plan. Right? This is an ongoing process. So that is why it says plans are living documents. Plans can live in documents. Right? Except to expect to update your risk management plan as you gain experience and encounter real world situations, because you need to adjust the plans with the real world scenarios, because we are living in a volatile environment, always changing. So you have to address that change. Right? Otherwise, not going according. Right? Then regular review. You need to do the regular review. And you need to check the control effectiveness, right? And the business are changing, and you need to aware about the new risk, dynamic risk coming up. In 2000, there is a no cybersecurity sort of thing. In 2000, there is a no big data. So now we are having the artificial intelligence, digitalization, new risks is coming up, dynamic risk. Sometimes in next year, there's a different sort of risk is coming up. So you need to aware about the dynamic risk. And also you need to look at the business change. Sometimes your business has been changed. You are having a kind of outsourcing facility, you can have some acquisitions, right? Likewise. Right? So therefore, you need to always live within the plan, because you need to review it and evaluate. So that is the video that I have been uploaded to the LMS. Right. So now your turn. Right. So what we have discussed, make it as a question. Right. So I just read the question. Your company is a leading manufacturer of a medical device. You have recently launched a new product, revolutionary new hardware, right? Hardware, heart patients that is expected to be a major success. However, there have also been concerned about the potential for rare side effects. Medical product make side effects. What are the questions? What are the key risks associated with the launch of new product? With this new product, what kind of a risk you can identify? Right? So this is the context. Establish the context. This is the context. Right? So based on the context, you have to identify the risk. Right? And how would you go about establishing the context for this risk? What method would you use to identify potential risk? That is the risk assessment. Once you have identified the risk, how you are assessing them? What risk treatment options should you consider for those more significant risks? And how will you develop a plan to monitor and reduce the risk associated with this new product? So basically what you have to do, you need to elaborate the risk management process for this case study. How we are going to establish the context, how we are going to identify the risk, how we are going to assess the risk, how we are going to treat the risk, and how we are going to review the risk. So you have to write answers for these 5 questions. How you are going to identify what are the risks you have identified, how you assess, how you establish the context, how you are treat the risk, and how you are reviewing the risk. So try to write answer. I will give you 10 minutes. What I need to highlight is the risk management process. Right? Risk management process is all case study highlight. So for the key risks you have identified. Safety risk. If you elaborate it, maybe by safety. So one common risk related to the healthcare is safety risk, because you are giving a medical what do you call it, treatment. Right? Sometimes can be failed. Safety risk is there. Yes. Any other risk? Yes. Yes, compliance. Very good. So because we are in a highly regulated industry, healthcare is a highly regulated industry. That's why that is also going to be a local issue. Because there are highly regulated industries. Highly regulated. Compliance is there. So if you are failed to address the compliance, right, sometimes you have to stop the operation. Right? Compliance. Yes. Good. Yes, any other risk? Oh. Yes, definitely. Sometimes the new product can be failed. Right? So there will be some market risk if you are not done the good market analysis. Right? Without doing the market analysis, you are presenting a new product or implementing a new product. Sometimes there will be some market risk to be there. Yes. Any others? Yes, correct. Financial risk. Right. So how the financial risk comes? They have to incur some cost. Right. Sometimes when you are comparing to the cost, the benefit will be lower for each. The sales value will be lower. Right. So it will create some financial risk. Whether we can cover up the expenses we have incurred for this product. Right. So those are the risks. Right. So then, so that risk, I'm not looking at assessing and the context of the industry. So what are the risk treatments? For each and so let's say first one is the safety risk. What are the risk treatments we can have? Product redesign. To reduce the safety risk before going for the redesign. Yes, correct. You can do some trials, right? Do more testing and check whether the appropriateness of the product, right? Then do more trials. Yes. Yeah. So you can have a kind of a process, right? For example, when you are making this product, so these areas you need to cover up. Right? The product in a can, so you should have a process to check whether that process is going accordingly. You will have a internal control, right, for that process. So the compliance, this compliance what we can do. Going to the insurance. Regulators. So you can have a discussion with the regulatory bodies. What are their requirements? They do this kind of thing. You can discuss with the kind of a medical council or something like that, right? And then you can ask what are the requirements, what kind of standard we have to maintain. You collect the information. So then, if you want, you can do the insurance, the business structure. Where most of the time, through the insurance, we can cover up the financial. So the compliance period of the insurance is our invest. Like, plus a loan. If you breach the law, you have to pay this. You can't transfer the compliance component. So there's the financial risk. Obviously, we can do the insurance, right? When you are going to produce a new product, you can do a niche one. What are the market risk? Yes. Market risk. So you can have kind of agreement with the doctor or something like that. Basically, they're doing it, right? And for the doctors are out, I know how many medical. You know, the product, etc. Yes, okay. Doctor Leah, okay. Then you know, yeah, comes. Doctors are all looking gun product comes as a medical. Pandemic. Pandemic, you're right. You can have a kind of doctors. How we can look at the markets? Well, market risk we have to understand. Just identify the competitors and what we can do to manage them. Yes. Practice the market risk. So what we can do is we can produce the product and the distribution part is done by another company. They are only producing the product. On the distribution, the risk is in the distribution company. They only produce. Likewise, specifically to that company, you need to identify the risk-free options. Over the answer, transferring risk mitigation. Those are not the answers. We need to write the specific answers like you. How you can mitigate the market risk? Yes, that is a kind of a how you can mitigate the financial risk. The transferring of risk, but you have to write the study. Right? Transferring risk will go there. You have to write the study specifically to the industry that you have given in the question. Right. All right. So what are the what kind of plan you can have to monitor and reduce the risk? Yes, what kind of plan you can have? Yes. Risk to monitor and reduce the risk. You have identified whether the risk is correctly identified, whether the risk treatment is correctly identified, what kind of mechanism we can have. Other than that, kind of broader way, we can have a kind of a risk management committee in the company. Right? We can have a risk management committee. That risk management committee will look at the identify risk and the risk response, whether they are okay. We are monitoring it. We are reviewing it. Right? Risk management committee we can have. Right? Risk management committee. Just other than that, what we can have. Just how we can monitor. So we can collect the information from the patient, as you correctly mentioned. We can review, right? Patient's answer, right? It's going accordingly. And we can do the periodic audit, right? We can do the periodic audit. And we can appoint a risk management officials to look at the risk management processes going accordingly. Likewise, we can have some plan or strategies to review and monitor. And how we can identify the risk. So you have identified different kind of risks. How we can identify risk. So you are saying that safety risk is there, financial risk is there, how we can identify it. What are the techniques we can follow? Just we can do the direct observation, right? We can do the direct observation, and we can discuss with the specialist. What is their requirement? That we call it as based on. Just say that and the product look very based on their requirement, we can identify the risk. Interviews, we can conduct the interview, and we can use the scenario analysis. When we product medium size scenarios, we can do the scenario analysis and identify the risk. Service, we can conduct the service using the patients and the doctors and other sort of people who involved in that one. So based on that, we can identify a different sort of risk. So this is what we have to do under the risk management process. So first of all, what we have to do? First of all, we need to establish the context. That means we need to identify the internal and external environment that our company is working on. So based on that context, now we figure material, international material, international material, the picture gama venas වෙනවා. result එක වෙනස් වෙන්න පුළුවන්, combinations වෙනස් වෙනවා. So first of all, we have to identify the context. We have to identify the pitch, the conditions. So then only we have to identify the risk. The pitch එක උදේ වැඩි පොර කරන්න. Board hygiene එක. සීතල. So those are the risks. So based on that, risk we have to assess. මොන වගේ risk අපිට high. Turn වෙන එක අපිට high risk එකක් නෙවෙයි. අපේ players හොඳට පොල් සොල්ල කරනවා. සීතල තමයි අපිට high risk. So then what can do? We can have a risk treatments. Either this have pass course line down. And either down to this side go down likewise. So the risk management process is an ongoing process. I'm going to the match in the risk management process here and stage. I got to change it. So likewise. So what are the 5 steps? Context. We need to identify, establish the context of the business. Basically, we need to identify the environment, internal and external environment. So based on that, we need to identify the risk using different sort of risk identification techniques like brainstorming, interviews, surveys, likewise. So after assessing that, or after identifying that, so you have to assess the risk. That means identify risk, you have to rate whether it's a high risk, low risk, or medium risk based on the likelihood and the impact. Likelihood and the impact. Possibility of happening and the impact. So afterward, after assessing the risk, that means after rating the risk into the certain levels, right? So you need to treat the risk accordingly, right? So we can generally treat, we can reduce the risk, we can avoid the risk, we can accept the risk, or we can transfer the risk. So after addressing the risk using our risk treatments or the risk response, again what we have to do, we need to review whether these risk treatments are okay. We need to evaluate the plan. And it is the control effectiveness is there. It is adequate enough. So if it is not adequate enough, what we have to do? Again, we have to start. We need to look at the environment. Then we have to identify the risk again, assess the risk, and then we have to do the treatment. So this has been a kind of an ongoing process. Right. There is a no ending. There's a no ending. Always we need to be with the risk management. So in the companies, most of the time we are having a dedicated person for the risk management. We call him as a risk officer. So in some companies we are having compliance officer. To look at this. Any questions? There is a risk management process. Is it clear? Guys, is it clear? Yes? No questions? Yes, nothing to ask. The practical question. All right. So then for today, I will wind up the session. We will, like, the next day, what we are doing is I will upload a question to the element from this area. So you have to upload that answer to the element. And also I will make available the Dropbox for the group assignment. Also, who is the batch coordinator? Nishan. Okay. So batch coordinators also can be the group. So we just have 5 men to group list. Right? You are able to tell that's okay. But better to have 5 people. So tell me that group list. According to that group sheet, I will allocate the time and the date. So, right. So tell me tomorrow. Possible. Nishan also. Can you ask? Yes. Right. So then according to that, I will allocate the time. So then you have to upload your camera submission for DVD and the remote. Right. Right. Just any issues? Right. So then find out the time.
Emang ini nama ini.